Hilchos Maachalos Asuros Perek Chamisha Asar. The Laws of Forbidden Foods, chapter 15. This is another one of those chapters that every boy, every student, yeshiva student who does smicha, learns the topics in this chapter. It's all about what's called taruvis. Taruvis means mixtures. Mixtures that can happen between permitted and forbidden substances, or forbidden substances falling into permitted substances, or the other way around. And it's quite involved. Shulchan Aruch turns this one chapter into almost 15 simanim, 15 sections. So it becomes a huge, huge conversation. But like we do just the Rambam. Anytime the Shulchan Aruch differs with the Rambam, I'll try to mention it. But it's just important to know that we're learning a very, very fundamental element of halacha today. Says the Rambam, halacha aleph, davar osur shenis'arev bedavar muter. When you have something forbidden that gets mixed into something permitted, there's always going to be two types of mixtures. This slide here is very important. It's going to come up again and again in these chapters. One is called min b'minoi. That's on the right side. Min b'minoi means a mixture of the same type. Mixture of the same type would be non-kosher meat that falls into kosher meat. A cow died. You took a piece of steak from the cow, and it fell into a pile of also cow meat that was slaughtered properly and is fully kosher. So now the mixture, there's no way for you to discern which is the non-kosher piece of meat. Then you have what's called min b'she'enoi minoi. Min b'she'enoi minoi means it's a mixture of different types. So let's say you had orange juice that was squeezed out. That's the picture I chose. Orange juice that was squeezed out from Shemitah. Sabbatical year orange was squeezed into orange juice that has a certain level of holiness. And it falls into not other orange juice, it falls into water. Now there's a mixture of different types. And here, there's room to detect the taste of the orange juice, perhaps, inside the water. So therefore, the Rambam says there's a general guiding principle when it comes to mixtures. Min b'she'enoi minoi. If one type got mixed into another substance that was not of its type, so in our example, the orange juice into the water, b'noisin tam. The way we're going to define whether or not the entire mixture becomes prohibited is based on whether it transfers taste into the rest of the mixture. Min b'minoi, however, when you're dealing with a mixture of the same type, she'i efsher lamed al tamoi, where it's impossible to discern the taste, you can't know if the non-kosher meat mixed into the kosher meat because there's no way to taste the difference. Yibatil b'roif. So scripturally speaking, biblically speaking, Torah law is that the non-kosher piece becomes nullified as long as there's a majority against it.
Also, shishim?
Oh, shishim, we're going to see in a second, that's rabbinic. Biblically speaking, it's called bitul berov. A simple majority nullifies the non-kosher piece. So if one non-kosher piece falls into two kosher pieces, boom, it's canceled. The whole mixture is permitted. Halacha beis ketzat. What does this look like? Give me a practical example. Chelev hakloyos. The Rambam goes with, I guess, what was common in his day. You had kidney fat. Kidney fat, as we learned in chapter 7 of these laws, is forbidden. Shenafa l'soich hagrisim. And it falls into a bowl of beans. So going back to this picture here, that's the one on the left. We're going to imagine this little sauce over here is fat, melted fat, and it's falling into your cholent that's full of beans. V'nimoyach hakoil. And all the fat has disintegrated, it's dissolved. So now this is a mixture of min b'she'enoi minoi. This is a mixture of two different types. So what do? Toya min es hagrisim. You taste the beans. Now, of course, a Jew can't taste the beans because there might be forbidden fat in here. So we're going to see in the end of this chapter that it's a non-Jew that does the tasting. If the non-Jew tastes the beans and he says, listen, I don't taste any fat, I know what kidney fat tastes like. I don't taste it. So this means that the fat has not transferred any taste to the beans, and therefore the beans are permitted.
Even if he's wrong.
Huh? Well, we trust him. This is the thing.
Right.
And we'll talk about that in the end of the chapter when we get to that halacha.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it is quite fascinating, and we'll talk about it. But if the guy does discover a taste of the fat, he tastes the beans and says, you know what, this actually tastes like kidney fat. And there was also the substance of the actual fat inside it. And the commentaries explain this to mean not that there was any visible fat, but that there was enough fat that if you were to consume the entirety of the beans within 2 to 9 minutes, like we learned yesterday, the kedei achilas pras, you would have brought into your system an olive size of fat. That's how much fat there is. There's a kazayas b'chedei achilas pras, it's called. There's an olive size portion in enough of the beans that can be consumed within the time it takes to consume a piece of bread the size of 3 eggs. Now, because there's the taste of the fat in the beans, and there's enough of the fat in the beans that has dissolved, the whole mixture is biblically forbidden. If the non-Jew tastes the beans and says, you know what, I do taste kidney fat, but there's not so much that if you were to consume 3 egg sizes of this bean mixture, you wouldn't consume a full olive-sized portion of fat. There's not that much. That's forbidden only rabbinically, but nevertheless it's forbidden because there is some taste transfer.
Can you benefit financially from it?
Benefit you could. Halacha Gimel. Ketzad hu mamoshay. What would qualify as the substance of the fat is in the beans? So the Rambam explains what I just told you before. There was enough fat that had dissolved into this mixture that there's an olive-sized portion per every 3 egg sizes of the beans. If then you would consume actually 3 egg-sized portions of the mixture, since in total there is an olive-sized portion of the fat in there, you would get lashes, because both the taste and the substance of the prohibition is there. But if you ate less than 3 egg sizes of the mixture, which means you haven't consumed an olive-sized portion of the fat, you would only get rabbinic lashes from the rabbis. Same thing if, on a total scale, there wasn't even enough fat in the mixture to give you an olive-sized portion per 3 eggs. Even if it tastes like fat and you ate the entire pot, the whole prohibition is only rabbinic in this case. You only get lashes that are rabbinic. That was an example of the first type of mixture, min b'she'enei minoi, a mixture of different types. Now let's give an example of min b'minoi, a mixture of the same type. Nafal chelev kloyos lechelev ha'alya v'nimayach hakoil. Kidney fat fell into tail fat, and the whole thing got dissolved. Now, tail fat is permitted. Kidney fat is forbidden. But go look at a bowl full of fat. There's no way for you to know, to taste. You're going to have a guy taste it. It all tastes like fat. You can't discern kidney fat taste in tail fat. This is called min b'minoi. So therefore, the Rambam says we're going to go with biblical law first. Im haya chelev ha'alya kishnayim b'chelev hakloyos. If the amount of tail fat was double the amount of kidney fat, harei hakoil muter min ha'Torah. The whole mixture is now permitted biblically because it's a ratio of 1 to 2. This is called bitul beroiv, nullification in the majority, and it's nullified. Afilu, even if it's not a mixture of liquid, afilu chatichas nevela shenisarva b'shtei chatichas shel shchuta, as in the picture on the screen. Let's just say there was some kosher and non-kosher meat. A piece of non-kosher meat, and non-kosher doesn't mean horse meat. We're talking about cow meat that died. It wasn't slaughtered properly, mixed into properly slaughtered cow meat. There's no way to discern the taste. As long as there's a majority, hakol muter min ha'Torah, everything is permitted biblically. Avol midivrei soifrim, but rabbinically, here we come to the famous rule of batel b'shishim, cancelled in 60, says the Rambam, rabbinically speaking, hakol asur. If such a mixture were to happen, it's only a ratio of 1 to 2. Everything would be forbidden ad sheyoivad davar ha'asur me'oitzem mi'utay, until we can consider the forbidden substance to be lost in its minority, in its minute quantity, davar chashuv she'enei emedes, and it will not be something important whose literally eno means color, but the point is that its substance is significant, kamei yizbayer, as will be explained. What is the amount for that? At what point does the forbidden substance become so mixed in that it's lost in its minute quantity? This depends on the amount that the sages gave it. This is the more famous one. There are some things whose amount is 60. As long as there's a ratio of 1 to 60, the forbidden substance becomes nullified. Lesser known is that there are some things that only become nullified in 100, and some things only become nullified in 200. And we're going to go through them today. But the point is that a much bigger quantity is required to nullify, 60, 100, or 200. Nimtzei Salameit says the Rambam, let's summarize. It turns out that you learn. Shekali Surin Shabbatayra. Any prohibited substance that's prohibited biblically. Bein Yisurei Malkus, Bein Yisurei Kares, Bein Yisurei Hana, whether it's a prohibition that carries lashes, a prohibition that carries excision, a prohibition that carries a prohibition of benefit, Shanis Aravu b'Maichal Hamutar, and they got mixed into a permitted food. So we're going to summarize the rule. Min b'she'enei minai b'nei sintam. A mixture of two different types always goes after the taste. Have a guy taste it. Can you taste it? The forbidden substance? Forbidden. You can't taste it? Permitted. Min b'minoi. She'i ef shalamed alatam. Mixture of the same type. Where you cannot discern the taste. She'urei b'shishim. Ay b'meya. Ay b'masayim. The general rule is it's going to be either 60, 100, or 200. That kind of a ratio will nullify it. Chutz. With a couple of exceptions. Number one, the exception is yayin nesech. Yayin nesech is, of course, the topic we discussed the last couple of days. Wine that was used in a libation for idol worship. Because of the stringency of idol worship, it doesn't become nullified even in 1,000. Here's a bottle of wine that says yayin nesech on it. If this wine falls into this barrel, then the whole barrel is forbidden. Now, we'll see at the end of the chapter, I believe it's today or maybe it's tomorrow, that it's not so simple, this picture.
Yeah, it would be just so nice if all said yayin nesech, you know.
No, the reason why it's inaccurate is because in some cases, when the forbidden wine falls into the permitted wine, there's more room for leniency. If the permitted wine falls into the forbidden wine, then it's all forbidden for sure. But we're going to just use this picture for simplicity's sake. So that's one exception. Yayin nesech is not nullified even in larger quantities. V'chutz mi tevel, and also tevel. Tevel, of course, is untithed produce. We have this a couple of times already. When you harvest a crop, you have to give 2% to the Kohen, 10% to the Levi, that whole thing. As long as you haven't done that, the produce is called tevel. You could even have tevel wine. Let's say you took grapes, you didn't tithe it in the proper way, you made wine out of it, this wine is tevel. So if you were to pour this wine into a larger quantity of other permitted wine, the whole mixture is forbidden. You know why? Shaharei efshar lesaknoi. For a different reason than the idol worship. Here it's because you could fix it. All you have to do is take some wine, separate the tithes. So as long as you haven't, we're going to make it super, super forbidden. It's not even going to get nullified, even 1 in 1,000. Omi pnei zeh, and therefore, because of this, oisrin b'minon b'chol shehein. If they get mixed into the same type, they forbid the entire mixture, even at the smallest quantity. Tiny bit of yayin nesech wine, tiny bit of tevel wine gets mixed into other wine, the whole wine mixture is forbidden. However, v'shalei b'minon b'nei sintam. If it's into a mixture of a different type, they still follow the rule of discernible taste. Kishar kol yisurim, like any other prohibition. So if, let's say, yayin nesech wine fell into a barrel of apple juice, so now you're dealing with two different types, then a guy would have to taste it, and if he tastes the wine, it's forbidden. If he doesn't taste the wine, then it's permitted. Ketzad, let's give the example that I just gave from the wine. Tipas yayin nesech, a drop of forbidden wine. Shenaflu aleha kama chaviyes shel yayin, that many barrels of wine fell onto it. See how the Rambam describes it? The permitted wine fell onto the forbidden wine. Because as I said, in the end of the chapter, we're going to see that that's how it really works. The ideal way to prohibit libation wine is when permitted wine falls onto the prohibited wine. Hakol asur k'meishi yizbar, everything is forbidden as we explained. Why? It's 60 times more, 1,000 times more, it doesn't matter. Yayin nesach never gets nullified. Same thing if you have a cup of tevel wine, untithed wine, got mixed into a barrel, hakol tevel, everything is considered to be untithed, until you separate the requisite truma and meiser that would be fitting for this mixture, as will be explained in the proper place in the 7th book of the Rambam. We're going to talk about this. How do you separate tithe from mixed wine? You have to go proportionally. It's a whole calculation that you make. The point is, you must first take those gifts, and then the wine is permitted again. Halacha ches, peiros shvius, fruits of Shemitah. I gave you that example before when I showed you the orange juice. I said it could be processed from Shemitah fruits. The thing with Shemitah fruits is, afal pi, even though they follow the same rules.
Oh, this book doesn't say, this is shvi.
Yeah. What does it say about you?
Shvi.
Yeah, Shvis.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I said, yeah.
He said Shemitah.
Well, I was translating it as Shemitah, because Shvi is 7th year is Shemitah. It's the same thing.
That's why it says so.
Yeah. So, Afal Pi, even though they follow the same rules as the mixtures, which is, Sheim Nisarvu B'minon B'chol Shehu. If they get mixed into the same type, they forbid the mixture completely, even the smallest amount. V'shalei B'minon B'noisin Tam. And if they get mixed into another type, you go after the discernible taste. Even though it follows those rules, Einon Bichlal Isurei Torah. They're not included in the category of biblically prohibited substances. She'ein Oisa HaTaharuvas Asura. Because if Shemitah fruit falls into a mixture of fruit, it doesn't forbid the mixture. It simply makes the whole mixture holy. See, Shemitah fruit are allowed to be consumed, but they have laws as to how they can be consumed. So when you have a Shemitah orange, like mixed into a pile of regular oranges, you don't say all the oranges are forbidden. You just say all the oranges are Shemitah holy. Elachayav lechel kol ha'taruvas b'kedushas shvius. You have to eat the entire mixture, considering each one to be with the holiness of Shemitah. Kameshi Yizbar B'im Kaimayaz will also be explained in its place. Laws that don't apply outside of Israel, but in Israel this law applies even till today. It's very complicated.
Which means you can't eat it.
You could eat it, you just can't dispose of any part of it. You have to eat every single thing. You can't throw out orange seeds. You can't throw out orange peels. You have to let it all rot. It's a whole complicated thing. The point is, when a Shemitah orange mixes into other oranges, it doesn't become forbidden, it simply becomes holier. Halacha tes. Now we're entering another category. This is known in halacha as davar sheyesh le matirin. Forbidden food that will eventually become permitted. It's in a state right now that it's forbidden, but the same food is going to become permitted. First classic example says the Rambam, chametz bepesach. Leavened food, chametz on Passover. Afal pi shehu me'isurei Torah, even though it is a biblical prohibited food, einay biklalis elu. It doesn't follow these rules of same type mixtures, different type mixtures, discernible taste, not discernible taste. Lefi she'eina ta'aruvas asura la'ilam. Because such a mixture is not going to be forbidden forever. Right after Passover, the whole mixture is going to be permitted, as we explained in the third book, in the laws of chametz and matzah. Lefichach, therefore, during the time that it is forbidden, oiser b'kol shehu, it forbids the entire mixture at even the smallest quantity. Bein b'minay, bein shalei b'minay, whether it's in the same type or a different type, because it's not going to be forbidden forever. V'hu adin, the same would apply litvua chadasha, new grain, shenisarva b'yishana milifnei ha'omer, which got mixed into old grain from before the omer barley offering was brought. This was a topic in chapter 10, the idea of chadash, that once new grain grows before the barley offering is brought, you cannot eat it. So what happens if that grain gets mixed into old grain? Oiseres b'kol shehu. It forbids the entire mixture at the smallest quantity. Shaharei yesh la matirin, because it has a way to become permitted. Shala'achar ha'omer yutar ha'koil. Once the omer barley offering will be sacrificed, the whole mixture will become permitted. So right now, while it's still forbidden, even the smallest quantity is going to forbid the mixture. V'chein kol davar sheyesh le matirin. The same thing applies to anything that has a way to become permitted. Va'afilu haya isurei midivreim, even if it's only rabbinically prohibited. Kagain isur muktzah, v'neilad b'yamtiv, like the prohibition of muktzah and neilad on holidays. Muktzah means something which you set your mind aside. This piece of wood, you're not going to use it during the holiday. It becomes muktzah. You cannot touch it. So if that piece of wood gets mixed into your firewood pile, the whole prohibition, the whole mixture is forbidden, because that muktzah is going to become permitted after the holiday. Same thing with neilad. We had this whole discussion in the laws of holiday. When a chicken lays an egg on a holiday that follows Shabbat, if a holiday is on Sunday, and a chicken lays an egg, that means that it was prepared, it was ready to go the day before. And Shabbat cannot prepare to a holiday. So it's called neilad, it's a newly born thing. You cannot have benefit from it on the holiday. If that egg that was laid, that fresh egg, gets mixed into 1,000 other regular eggs, all those eggs are forbidden for the whole holiday, because right after Yom Tov, it's all going to become permitted. So therefore, le'nasnu be'chachamim shir. The sages didn't give any amount. Even one in multiple thousands doesn't become nullified. Because there's a way to make it permitted. Just wait some time. It'll all be permitted. Kigayin, another example would be, biblical example would be, hekdesh. Something that you consecrated. Here's a cow. You decided to dedicate it as a sacrifice. While it's alive, it walks into a pile of a whole bunch of other cows. Now all the cows are considered to be holy. You cannot have benefit from them until you do what? What's the way to permit them? Is to redeem the holiness. You take some money and you say, I want to transfer the holiness of the cow onto this money. So there's a way for it to become permitted. Therefore, the whole mixture is forbidden in the meantime. Oh, if you mark it, then it's not a mixture. No, mixture, but yeah, mixture means you lost identity. Another example would be Meiser Sheni, second tithe. Produce from the second tithe, you meant to bring it to Jerusalem, it got mixed into your other produce. It could, the holiness could be transferred. So since it could become permitted, while it's mixed up, the whole mixture is forbidden. Anything like that follows the same rules. Aval, however, ha'arla. What about arla? Arla is what you were talking about before. The fruit during the first 3 years. You can't have benefit from it. V'kilei kerem, and mixtures in a vineyard. You plant a vegetable in a vineyard. V'chela v'dam v'chayetze behen, or forbidden fats, forbidden bloods, and something like that. V'chein trumais, or some of the tithes. The tithes given to the Kohen. Nasnu chachamim bahen shir. Over here, the sages did give them an amount, even though they would seem to go into the category of davar sheyesh matirin, things which will become permitted. Right? After 3 years, the food will be permitted. After you separate a tithe, it's permitted to a Kohen, let's say. Says the Rambam, nevertheless, she'ein bahen derech heter l'chol adam. They don't have a way to become permitted to everybody. Truma only permitted to a Kohen, but not to everybody. So therefore, it doesn't go into the category of forbidden food that will become permitted. Yero Ali, says the Rambam, it seems to me, sha'afilu davar sheyesh matirin, even things which could become permitted and therefore should be completely nullified, completely forbidden in the mixture. Im nisarev b'she'enei minai v'loy nasan tam, if it got mixed into a different type and the taste was not discernible, mutter, I think it should still be permitted. Lo yiyeh sheyesh matirin chamor miteva. Let's not make this forbidden food which could become permitted, let's not make it more strict than untithed produce. Untithed produce, you could fix it. You could simply take the tithes. And nevertheless, if it gets mixed into a different type, it goes after the taste discerning, as we explained. So, any other time, something that's forbidden and could become permitted gets mixed into another type, if it doesn't give taste, it should be nullified. Except for one thing. V'al tisma chametz bepesach. Don't ask me a question from chametz. Chametz, we say, is never permitted. That's a separate thing. Sha'Torah amra, Torah says, special verse, kol machmetzes lo yiseichelu. Any mixture of chametz you shall not eat. Leficha chachmiru by kamesha be'arnu. Therefore, they're strict about it, as we explained also in the third book, in the laws of chametz and matzah. That's the only one that, since it could become permitted, we go all the way with it. Anything else which could become permitted, if it goes into a different type and doesn't give taste, it's going to be nullified. So, returning now that we finished with the exceptions, let's go back to the general principles. The following are the amounts that the sages applied for bittul, for nullification. Sometimes it's in 60, as the Rambam said, 100 or 200. Says the Rambam, we begin with the 100 one. Hatruma, truma is the tithe given to the Kohen. Let's say you gave some wheat to the Kohen, he made some bread, it's truma bread. Utrumas meiser. Trumas meiser is the 10th of the 10th. You give a tithe to the Levi, 10%. The Levi has to give 10% to the Kohen. The hachala, chala is dough, of course, the beginning piece of the dough you separate also to the Kohen. The habikurim, and the first fruits that are given from the 7 types of Shivat HaMinim, 7 special Israeli fruits. If those got mixed into other things, oilin be'echad umeya, they become nullified in a mixture of 1 to 100. So you have a truma loaf, gets mixed into another 100 loaves, nullified. A trumas meiser apple, mixed into 100 apples, nullified. Challah dough, 100 times itself, nullified. Pomegranate, same thing. Vitzarich leharim. However, you have to lift one up out of the mixture. So if one pomegranate of bikurim gets mixed into 100 pomegranates, we say it's nullified, but you still must take out one pomegranate, just to compensate for because somewhere in the mixture is a forbidden pomegranate, so you got to take one out. Umitzdarfin zeim zeh. In addition, these different prohibitions can combine with each other and will require more nullification. So here in this picture I made all different types. But let's say it was it was truma bread and also bikurim bread, because bikurim could come from wheat, right? So now you have two problematic loaves of bread for different reasons. One is a problem because it's truma, one is a problem because it's bikurim, and they both fall into a pile of 100 loaves. So you could say, let me divorce the two prohibitions. Let me look at the truma battling the 100 loaves, nullified. Let me look at the bikurim battling the 100 loaves, nullified. But because they combine with each other, so what you really have is two loaves, two prohibited loaves that are battling the 100. That's not 1 to 100. You need 200 loaves now to nullify these two loaves. You understand? They can combine with each other to make a combined power requiring more nullification.
So hold on, but with these ratios, the one loaf that fell into the bulk of the loaves.
Yes.
You need 100 loaves.
100.
It can't be 99. Then
No, exactly. 100 to 1. Yes. Very good point. The chain, another example that would be 1 to 100. Prusa shel lechem hapanim, l'soich prusa shel chulin. Literally today's Chumash. This is a kiss from Hashem. If you learn the daily portion of Chumash, today we're studying about the lechem hapanim. That's the showbread that was on the shulchan. Special bread. This is kind of how it looked according to one opinion. It was made as a flat piece and it was folded into itself and it was put on the shulchan on the table. The Kohanim would eat it week to week. So if a lechem hapanim piece of bread falls in l'soich pruses shel chulin, into a bunch of pieces of regular mundane bread, oilin be'echad umeya, they get nullified, and again in a ratio of 1 to 100. Just to note, the commentaries point out this has to be a case where the lechem hapanim became ritually impure. If it stayed ritually pure, it never becomes nullified. Ketzat. Let's describe what we mean, even though we just did, as I was talking it out, the Rambam will do so in detail. Sa'ah kemach me'echad me'elu. He doesn't use the loaf case, he uses flour. You have a sa'ah. Sa'ah is an amount of volume of flour of any of these things. Okay, truma flour, challah flour, bikurim flour. Oy sa'ah mikulam. Or a combined sa'ah from them all. Shenafla lemeya sa'ah kemach shel chulin. Fell into 100 sa'ah, that volume, of regular flour. Chulin means mundane, not unholy. V'nisarev hakoil, and everything got mixed up. Since there's a ratio of 1 to 100, it becomes nullified. However, you have to remove meidim min hakoil sa'ah achas k'neged sa'ah shenafla. Remove from the mixture one sa'ah, opposite, corresponding to the sa'ah, the forbidden sa'ah that fell inside. And then you're good. V'hashar muter l'chol adam, the rest is permitted to everybody. Nafla lepaches mimeya. But if the mixture fell into less than 100, like Philip just said before, not 100 to 1, but 99 to 1, doesn't matter. Nasa hakol meduma. Everything becomes mixed. The word meduma literally means mixed, but it's a specific reference to when holy foods or forbidden foods get mixed into unholy, non-forbidden foods. And so here you see how the principle of 1 to 100 applies. That's for these 5 foods. Let's look at an example of 1 to 200. Ha'arla v'kilei kerem, fruit in the first 3 years, and vegetables that were mixed into a vineyard, and create what's called kilei kerem, vineyard mixtures. Oilin be'echad u'masayim. They need to be nullified in a mixture of 1 to 200. Umitzarfin zeim zeh, they can also combine with each other. Ve'ein tzarich laharim. But here, once they're nullified, you don't have to remove the forbidden, questionable piece from the mixture. Ketzad, what would that look like, for example? Revi'is shel yayin arla kilei kerem. You have a revi'is, about 3-4 ounces of wine that was produced from arla grapes in the first 3 years, or vineyard mixture grapes. Or it was a combined revi'is from them both. Half a revi'is of arla wine, half a revi'is kilei kerem wine. Shenafla l'seich masayim revi'iyah shel yayin, and they fall into 200 revi'uses of regular kosher wine. Hakol mutter. The whole mixture is permitted. Ve'ein tzarich laharim klum. No need to raise or remove anything because it's totally nullified. Nafla lepaches mimasayim. If it fell into a mixture of not 200 but 199 times itself, hakol asur bahana. Everything is forbidden. Not just forbidden. It's forbidden even to have benefit from, because kilei kerem, you cannot benefit from it at all. So the whole mixture now becomes forbidden to derive any benefit from it. Now, what's the reason for the difference? How come in the first case, when it was 1 to 100, you had to remove one of the measurements, and here you don't have to? The reason is because truma belongs to the Kohen. It's the Kohen's financial money. And imagine you have a truma loaf of bread or a truma thing of flour, falls into 100 times itself. You say, you know what? Now the whole thing is permitted, it's not truma. Says the Kohen, what happened to my money? I just lost a sa'ah of flour. So you have to remove that flour, give it to the Kohen, presume that that's the truma one. And the rest, give to the regular Jews. But in the case of the Orla and the Kili Akerem, doesn't belong to anybody. Nobody can lay claim to it. Therefore, once it gets permitted, it becomes totally permitted.
Yeah, but if there is one that was portioned out for the Kohen.
If it's portioned out for the Kohen, same thing. No, same thing, same thing.
You've got to pull out a certain amount of water
Yes,
from there.
and say that's yours. Lefichach, therefore, by the way, kol truma she'ena kohenim makpidin aleha, any truma separations, which the Kohenim wouldn't mind losing, they're not particular about it, kigain trumas haklisin, v'hacharuvin, like truma from low quality figs, or carob, u'sa'idin shebe'edem, an Edomite barley. If it falls into a mixture, ein etzarech laharim. You don't have to remove it because the Kohen's not going to say, "Hey, I want that. Give me my figs back." It's low quality. Let it stay with the Jewish people. The lama kaflu shir arla v'kili akar. Why are the amounts for these two 1 to 200 double the amount of the other ones 1 to 100? Because their prohibition is higher. They're prohibited even to have pleasure from. So we go double. The lama samchu al shir mea bitrumais. What's the reason for the 100 number when it comes to truma? So you have to follow a little bit of math. Shaharei trumas meiser echad mimeya. If you think about it, here's our favorite slide with the gifts of produce. Okay, follow this. You have a guy. He's a farmer. He's a harvester, right? He needs to give 10% to the Levi. After he gives 2% to the Kohen, 10% to the Levi. Of that 10%, the Levi is going to have to give 10% to the Kohen, which of the total means that he's giving 1% to the Kohen, right? The total mixture, because if 10% came to him, he gives 10%, it's 1%. Shari trumas meiser echad mimeya. This, in the end of the day, the trumas meiser, the gift to the Kohen from the Levite gift, is 1 out of 100 of the total. Umikadesh hakoil. And if you leave it in the mixture, it makes the whole mixture forbidden. Shenemar, as it says, this is the verse about Trumas Meiser, es mikdeshay mimenu. You have to remove the holy part from it, which means if it stays inside the mixture, just that 1%, 1 to 100, becomes forbidden. Amru chachamim, so the sages learned from this, is that, look, Trumas Meiser, if it's in the mixture, makes the whole mixture forbidden. That's 1 to 100. From there we learn, davar sha'ata meidim mimenu. The 1% that you have to remove from the mixture, if it goes back into it, it will make the whole mixture forbidden. Hence we learn anything associated with truma needs to have a ratio of 1 to 100 to nullify it. All other Torah prohibitions, like meat of non-kosher insects, creepy crawlies, forbidden fats, forbidden bloods, anything like that, they are the classic 60 amount. 60 times itself, permitted. Ketzad. Describe it to me. What does this look like? Kazayas chelev kloyos, shenafal sech shishim kazayas mechelev alya. Apparently fats were very common in the Rambam's times. He says, an olive size of kidney fat falls into 60 olive sizes of tail fat. Hakol mutter, now it's all permitted. Nafal lepachas mishishim hakol aser. Falls into less than 60, the whole thing is forbidden. V'chenim nafal kisa'ira chelev. Same thing if you have only a barley corn size of fat. Even though a barley corn size of fat is not going to get you a punishment, only for an olive size, nevertheless it's forbidden. You have to have 60 times that of permitted, 60 permitted barley corn sizes. Same thing with any other prohibition, it's 1 to 60. Same thing with the fats of the sciatic nerve. Remember this picture here, this is the gid hanasha, the sciatic nerve. And this little ball here is what's called the shuman, the fats attached to the sciatic nerve. If that falls into a pot of meat, we rate it at 60, 1 to 60. The ein shuman hagid min haminyan, we don't include the actual fat as part of the number. In other words, it has to be battled by 60 times itself. Even though the whole prohibition of the fat of the gid hanasha is only rabbinic, as we explained, and we're soon going to see in a moment, that when things are only prohibited rabbinically, they need 1 to 59, not 1 to 60. They can be counted as part of the 60. Nevertheless, over here we're more strict. Since the sciatic nerve is considered to be a creature in its own right, and we're going to see multiple times throughout the next few days, that when something is a creature in its own right, a full creature, it never becomes nullified, even in 1 to 60. So here we have a mix. We have a creation in its own right, but it's only rabbinic. So therefore, at least hechmiru baiki yisur Torah. At least we're going to be strict, like biblical prohibitions, and require 1 to 60, not 1 to 59, as we're about to see with other rabbinic prohibitions. The hagid atzmai, the actual nerve, the actual sinew, ein mishadin by the ein eiser. We don't need a measure against it. It doesn't even forbid a mixture. She'ein begidim b'neisen tam. The Rambam follows the opinion that says that the gid hanasha doesn't have inherent flavor. It doesn't transfer flavor to anything else, and therefore it doesn't forbid a mixture that it falls into. Aval kal shenizbashel imabasar, but udder, cow udder, that gets mixed, it gets cooked with meat. And we saw this in chapter 9 of these laws. Bishishim is nullified in 60, ukchal min aminyan, including the udder. In other words, it can be 1 to 59, and the udder will be the 60th. Since the whole prohibition of the udder is rabbinic, as we explained in chapter 9, we're worried that there's some milk in the meat of the udder. The sages were more lenient with its amount and said, as long as 1 to 59, it's nullified. Yutes. Beitza shenimtza ba'efrayach shanishlekai in beitzim hamutaris. Okay, here's the case. Not sure if you can see the chick. Here's a bunch of eggs. Can you see this egg over here? Has a little chick in it. This is basically it's like a live egg, okay? This is prohibited, of course. Regular eggs are permitted, but an egg with a live chick is forbidden. By mistake, you have an egg with a chick that you stewed, you boiled it with permitted eggs.
It could become flesh.
Huh?
It could become flesh.
A little worse than that. Im haisa im shishim ve'achas vihi. If it's 1 to 61, here we're a little more strict, not 1 to 60. If there's 61 times itself, harehein mutarais, then all of the eggs are permitted. Haisa im shishim bilvad nesru akol. But if it's only against exactly 60, it's all forbidden. Why do we have an extra stringency here? Why is it 1 to 61? Again, an egg is a creature in its own right. So were it to be a biblical prohibition, it would never become nullified. So at least asu heker ba v'hisifu b'shiyura. The sages wanted to make some kind of distinguishing mark on it and say, you know what? In this case, the chick egg, that's going to require 61, a little more than the regular. Aval beitzas oif tameh shanish lekayim beitzei oif tar. But let's say it was not a chick egg. Let's say it was all regular eggs. Just one of the eggs was from a forbidden bird. Now, I made it blue to show you that it's prohibited, but of course, in reality, it was brown. There's no way to tell it apart. They're all the same color. But one of them is from a non-kosher bird. Loy asra oisam.
That's the scary part.
So now, it actually does not forbid the mixture. Why doesn't it forbid the mixture? Says the Talmud, because we're talking about here eggs that were cooked in their shells. When eggs are in their shells, they don't impart flavor. Only when there's a chick in there, the chick we're worried about will deal with the rest of the eggs. But if there's no chick, it's just regular eggs, so the eggs in the shell are not going to transfer any flavor to each other, and therefore it doesn't become forbidden. The im taraf elu im elu. What if you didn't cook the eggs in their shells? You open them up and you beat them all together with each other. Oishen is arva beitzas oif tameh beitzas treifa in beitzim acheros, or not a cooked mixture, but simply in a case of eggs, you lost a non-kosher egg, or the egg of a treifa chicken that was going to die in 12 months, with other kosher eggs. Shi'uran b'shishim. Now we go with a classic amount, and it's 1 to 60, is nullified. Chaf Aleph. Uminayin samcho chachamim al shir shishim. Where did the sages get this 60 thing from? Was this like a magic number? How come 60? So here we turn to an interesting verse about the Nazirite, the Nazir. When the Nazir makes a vow not to grow, not to cut his hair, not to drink wine, at the end of his term, he has to bring sacrifices. Now, one of the sacrifices is a ram. Of this ram, there's a foreleg, one of the legs that goes and is considered to be holy, goes to the Kohen. Nevertheless, even though it goes to the Kohen and a Jew cannot eat it, you cook it together with the rest of the meat. Now, we have a tradition that a foreleg of the animal is 1/60th of the whole animal. So what do you see? You cooked a forbidden thing. Forbidden to the Jew, permitted to the Kohen. With the rest of the animal, because it was 1 to 60, it doesn't make the rest of the animal holy. So from here we learn to the rest of the Torah. The part that's removed from the Nazir's ram, the foreleg, echad mishishi mishara ayil, is 1/60th of the rest of the ram. V'him is basheles imay ve'enai seresaisai, and it's cooked with it and doesn't forbid it. Shenemar, as it says, v'lokach hakoyin as hazroya b'sheila mina ayil. The Kohen takes the foreleg already cooked from the ram. Since it's 1/60, it's nullified. Chav beis min b'minay v'davar acher shenis arvu. You have a mixture that's got both elements. On the one hand, it's a mixture of the same type, but there's also a different type that got mixed in there. Kigain, for example, Kedeira shahaya b'chelev alya ugrisin. A pot had two permitted substances, tail fat and beans. The nafal eseicha chelev akloyes. Into this mixture falls in kidney fat. Relative to the tail fat, it's min b'minai, same type. Relative to the beans, it's min b'sheinei, min a different type. Everything gets melted, dissolved, and becomes one entity. What do? We combine all the permitted substances. The tail fat and the beans become one entity. And we measure the kidney fat against the total sum of the beans and the tail fat. If a total is 1/60, permitted. Because anyways, you won't be able to discern the taste in it because there has been two types of fats that became mixed. Same thing applies if it was truma that got mixed in. You would go 1 to 100. Vineyard mixtures, arla mixtures would go 1 to 200. Same thing. If they got mixed in with their type and also not their type, you just put all the permitted substances together and you battle against the forbidden food. 1 to 100 or 1 to 200 will become nullified in each respective case. Says the Rambam a general rule. When we measure, in all cases of prohibition, bein b'shishin, bein b'meya, bein b'masayim, whether it's 60, 100, or 200, misharin, we estimate using everything in the pot. B'marak, b'tavlin, b'kol sheyesh bakteira. The soup, the gravy meaning, the spices, everything in the pot. And we also estimate how much was absorbed into the pot after the prohibition fell in, because the pots are always absorbing things. And the total of that battles the prohibited food. So if you have a piece of non-kosher meat, falls into a cholent of kosher meat, you don't say, oh, I'm only going to battle the kosher meat against the non-kosher meat. No, you take the spices and the potatoes and everything in the cholent battles the non-kosher meat. Because we cannot know exactly how much it absorbed, we use guesstimation. Now, the Shulchan Aruch goes the opposite. The Shulchan Aruch says that because we don't know how much a pot absorbed, we cannot estimate the absorptions. Only what's actually in the pot, because maybe nothing was absorbed. At least in the case of min b'she'eino mino, a mixture of different types. But definitely, if it's the same type, we would guesstimate how much was absorbed, and we count that as part of the battling 60. Chaf Hey, another rule. Asur levatel isurin shel Torah lechatchila. This is a major principle. We don't actively nullify forbidden foods. V'im bital is a mutter. If you did after the fact, it's permitted. Meaning what? The Rambam will soon describe it. Let's say you have an apple falls into 30 apples. So what are you going to do? You have another 30 apples in your backyard. Grab 30 apples, pour it into the mixture. Oh, now I have 1 to 60. Can't do that. Only if it falls into 1 to 60, then it's nullified. You can't nullify it actively. If you did, it's still okay. The sages penalized you and forbade the whole mixture. It seems to me, says the Rambam, since it's a fine, we're only going to forbid the mixture on the person who transgressed and actively nullified it. For somebody else, it's all permitted. But you shouldn't do it. What does that mean? That you can't actively nullify foods. One sa'ah, one measure of arla food, fell into 100 other sa'ah. 100 is not enough for arla, you need 200. Shaharei nesar akal, which means the whole mixture is prohibited. Don't bring another 100 and combine it. Now it's going to be nullified 1 and 200. If you transgress and you did so, it's all permitted, at least to others, though not to you. But if it's a rabbinic prohibition, then we do nullify to begin with. We're allowed to actively nullify rabbinic prohibitions. What does that mean? Let's say milk fell into a pot of chicken. Not meat, chicken. Chicken is only forbidden rabbinically. And there was taste of the milk in the pot. Add some more chicken till the taste becomes nullified, and then it's okay. Anything like that. There's another major rule when it comes to mixtures. This is called tam lifgam. Tam lifgam means bad taste. Kvar be'arnu, we already explained. Sheim nasan davar ha'asur tamei b'davar ha'mutar. If forbidden substance transfers taste to permitted substance, nesar ha'koil, everything is forbidden. When does this law apply? If the taste is an improved taste, it's a good taste. But if the forbidden substance ruins the permitted substance, it destroys the taste, then it's permitted. Because it didn't enhance it. It actually made it worse. It has to be bad taste from beginning to end. You know, some things fall into a pot, they're bitter in the beginning and they become sweetened. This is bad from beginning to end. If it was bad taste in the beginning and then in the end, it became good. Or it's good in the beginning, but in the end it'll be bad. For now, it's forbidden. So the example that we talk about is, let's say, moldy meat. So here's moldy meat falling into good meat. The moldy meat is going to make the rest of the meat taste bad. So it doesn't forbid the mixture. It keeps it permitted. Now, we kept on saying in this chapter so many times, taste the food, taste the food. Who tastes the food? Who should taste the mixture? So, the Rambam says, if it was all kosher food, but it was just, let's say, truma mixed with unholy foods, so then any Jew cannot taste it, only a Kohen. Kohen tastes it, because every piece that you're picking up could be truma. And he'll tell you, if I can taste the truma, the whole thing is considered to be mixed. In the laws of truma, we'll explain how meduma works. Basically, we spoke about it before. You sell it all to the Kohen minus the amount of truma which was mixed in. Lamed v'im basar b'chala, but if it's all forbidden foods, milk and meat, or yayin nesech v'yayin arla v'kili kerem, or forbidden wine, forbidden arla wine, vineyard mixture wine, shenaflu lidvash, fell into honey, or besar shkatzim or demasim shenizbashali mayarak v'chayetzeben, or some creepy crawly insects were cooked with vegetables, or something like that. Now it's not kosher. A Jew cannot taste it. So what do we do? Toyem oisan ha'oivit kechavim v'soimchin al piv. A non-Jew tastes it, and we rely on his word. Here there's a very interesting argument among the sages. The Rambam says any non-Jew is believed. Across the board, just ask the guy. You can even ask him directly. Taste this food for me. Tell me, is it kosher, not kosher? And you'll be believed. The Shulchan Aruch says we only believe a non-Jew if he's talking casually. You cannot ask him directly, because then we're worried he might finagle, make a trick. You have to just, make as if you're inviting him for lunch. Here, I want to give you some food. And then he goes, it tastes like kidney fat. And then it's forbidden. He has to be talking casually. Some of the Shulchan Aruch commentaries say it's not about direct or casual, it's about the quality of the non-Jew. If he's a regular non-Jew, you don't believe him, because maybe he has an agenda. But if he's a chef, a professional guy, then you can rely on his word, whatever, because he won't risk his job. His whole job as a chef, he's supposed to be able to taste foods and have a fine tongue, you know what I mean? So if he reports false reports, people will find out and he'll lose his job. The Ramah is the most stringent. He says, no, we don't rely on taste of non-Jews at all. We always do 1 to 60. But the Rambam says we use all kinds of non-Jews. So this is the basic chart of how the commentaries look at different believabilities of non-Jews. Anyway, according to the Rambam, you ask the non-Jew, Im Amar Ein Baitam, if he says, I don't taste it, Oisha Amar Yesh Baitam, Umitam Rahu, Vahare Pagmoy, or he says, I taste it, but it's a bad taste. It's ruining the mixture. Hakol Mutter, it's all permitted. As long as it won't later on become good. If there's no non-Jew to taste, you don't have a non-Jew, you're living in a Jewish community, fully Jewish, we simply go with the regular amount, 60, 100, or 200. A mouse falls into beer or vinegar. Fascinatingly, we have to use 1 to 60. We worry, it could be that a mouse would add good taste to beer or vinegar. Yeah, you got to use 60. If a mouse falls into wine or oil or honey, then it's permitted. Even if you can taste the mouse taste, because it's for sure bad taste. Because wine, oil, honey, they all have to be pleasant flavor. The mouse will make them ruined and lose their taste. You have a goat. This is actually a whole goat that you're roasting on a spit. It's roasted whole with the forbidden fats inside it, which are now forbidden. Now you cannot eat from any of the goat, even the tip of its ear. Because the fats flow through all the limbs and add good taste to the kosher meat. Therefore, if the meat of the goat was lean, there wasn't so much kidney fat or intestinal fat. Only a little bit, about like 1 to 60. So if it's only a little bit, then we're not worried that the fat spread. You can eat all the meat, literally peel down until you reach the fats, and just discard the fats. Shulchan Aruch says you have to leave at least a little bit of the amount of the meat. You can't eat the whole meat, but Rambam says all the meat's okay. Exactly your question. If a thigh, you roast a whole thigh with the sciatic nerve, the sciatic nerve doesn't transfer taste. You can peel down the meat according to the Rambam till the sciatic nerve and then throw it out. You roasted an entire animal and you didn't remove the tissues and the membranes that you're supposed to remove. Again, peel down the meat till you get to those tissues. The moment you reach the forbidden part, cut it out, throw it away. Because the sinews don't transmit flavor, so we can't measure against them. We cannot roast kosher slaughtered meat with kosher non-slaughtered meat, dead animals meat, or non-kosher meat in the same oven. Even if they don't touch each other. But if you did, after the fact it's permitted, even if the non-kosher piece was very fatty, succulent, and the kosher piece was very lean, doesn't matter. If they're not touching, after the fact it's okay. Smell or steam doesn't forbid the pieces one to another, only actual taste. Since they aren't touching, no taste will transfer. Huh? No, here it's permitted. Though the Ramah and Shulchan Aruch says that we have to be, we do have to suspect that the steam will transfer taste. So according to the Ramah, it's totally forbidden. The final halacha, Lamed Dalet, Besar nevela maliach shenivlal imay besar shchuta. You have, again, cow meat that wasn't slaughtered. It's nevela, and it's full of salt, together with fully kosher slaughtered meat, also full of salt. Hareza nesar, the kosher meat is forbidden, because some of the juices from the nevela meat got absorbed into the kosher slaughtered meat. And here it's impossible to discern not the taste and not the amount. You don't know how much one penetrated the other. So they're all forbidden. If you have non-kosher salted meat mixed with kosher unsalted non-kosher salted fish with kosher unsalted fish, nesar mipnei tzirei, the brine will forbid the kosher fish. It will absorb some of the salty non-kosher fish. But if it was the opposite, the kosher fish was salted, the non-kosher fish was unsalted, the salty kosher fish doesn't become forbidden. Because even if the non-kosher fish, the unsalted, will absorb from the salted, it won't discharge back. It doesn't swallow so much to spit back out and then forbid the kosher fish. If you pickled non-kosher and kosher fish together, it's all forbidden. Unless it's a ratio of 1 to 200, if there's 200 kosher sardines and one non-kosher sardine pickled together, then it's all permitted.